morning, everyone. Richard Miller, Never Not Here. And today I have really something that I've been dreaming of for a long time and somehow hesitated to do. But I always want to make our speaking relevant. And so often it depends how you take it. Some people have had these real deep experiences and they say, oh yeah, what you're saying just hits me right in the heart, and it's just so, there's actually no concepts about it. I just relate to exactly what you're saying. And so many people are saying, whoa, that is far out. That is like interstellar space. I mean, that is a spiritual level. That is all the angels and the guardians and the guides, and it sounds so abstract. And somehow I always want to bring it down and say, well, how does this hit the street? How does this hit my life today? And so then we've got some special guests here. We've been talking to Michael Baxter all weekend. And now we have Andreas Moritz coming in from South Carolina. So Andreas, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Here.
Yeah. So, and then let me just show Michael's here too, so then everybody can say hi to Michael. And so,
hello everyone.
Yeah, so welcome back, Michael.
Thank you, Richard.
Okay. And so let me just say a couple of things to get this thing rolling. And what I want to say is that maybe it has to do with you, Andreas, because like the first time I read your book, the one that says Cancer's Not a Disease, and I was so fascinated with it, and I was reading it on the East Coast, and I got on the airplane to come back to Chicago, and I was so bubbling over with what was happening in my mind about reading Cancer's Not a Disease, and I had to share it with the people that were on the airplane. And so I sat in this, it was a Delta flight, but Delta had just bought Northwest, and Northwest had these old airplanes that have the motors on the side and the back, and they're so loud, it's unbelievable. And I was sitting right by a motor next to this lady. She was actually a Native American, worked as a librarian in the biggest Native American university. And I started to bubble over with the Cancer's Not a Disease and aerobic and anaerobic and so many kind of so all the knowledge that I had gained, but as just a reader, not as living it. And that lady actually, right with that engine being so loud, she fell asleep. And then it was unbelievable, she wanted to escape what I was saying so badly. I found out that she was a cancer survivor, see? And that she said, what's this guy know? I mean, he read a book, big deal. I've gone 10 years, 15 years, I've battled this thing. And I've suffered, and I've lost my hair or whatever happened, and and my relatives and this, that, and the other, and so anyhow, I mean, I was still bubbling over, and so then I moved to, it wasn't about her sleeping or not, but I mean, I just got tired of this droning in my ears. I went up to the front of the airplane, sat down by another guy, and I was still bubbling over, and I was still talking about the book, and he was very stoic, he listened and listened, but really didn't get involved in the conversation. And I found out he was a cancer survivor, and that and here I was coming off like an outsider that didn't know what I was talking about. And from that, I mean, in the end, it was really something, because I was so enthusiastic that he actually asked me for the name and the author and name of the book, because he said, well, my brother also has cancer, and if any way he could avoid what I've been doing, wow, And so then from that, I just said, okay, these are things, when we speak spirituality and stuff, we're saying this does exist, this doesn't exist, this is not true, this is real, this is unreal. We say so many things that, one more thing I want to say, and maybe it's it's an amazing thing too. Last week I did a talk with somebody in Uruguay, and she grew up in well, she grew up in Uruguay, but this was Ecuador where she was staying, and we were talking about her son. Her son had was born with a syndrome, which is a mutation syndrome, and he looked like a regular person. He looked like a regular young boy until he was about 10, and then his bones started to go back and start to grow, and his head grew about twice as big, his face went all out of proportion, his spine went into a huge hunchback, and he became like what Hollywood would say is a monster. And it was just like the Hunchback of Notre Dame, or Bela Lugosi being Frankenstein or something. And the amazing story, the reason I was talking to her and the story we were telling is that with this growth, this wild growth, he realized that the growth wasn't me. In other words, I'm not this container. And he realized it in such a strong way that everybody he came to, I mean, if they would mistreat him and stuff like that, he would know that they weren't mistreating him, and somehow his heart would beam through there, and he converted so many people, and he actually learned to use that deformity, which was that growth, that wild growth. He used that to touch people's heart. And I was thinking, that's so relevant, because so many of us have this growth problem, and they're saying that, 1 out of 2 of us are going to maybe touch cancer somewhere in our lives. And would it be that we could touch that cancer and realize that this cancer's not me, this vehicle's not me, this body's not me, and really give everything, give our life even more into touching other people, making a positive influence on the world, and anyhow. So I wanted you and Michael to talk because Michael has a history with cancer, and maybe, I don't know, Michael, do you want to say something about?
Well, I was diagnosed with chronic myelogenous leukemia in '94, and it is pretty much in remission. Right now I take a sort of a wonder drug. It's called Gleevec. Before that I took shots, but I've taken some kind of chemotherapy every day for the last 17 years or whatever. But I'm not quite sure, Andreas, what you're going to tell me, but I would agree with this much, that cancer is not really a disease. I see it more like an outer reflection of something that's some kind of awakening that's happening on the inside. But I am very interested to hear what you have to say.
Well, Michael, again, most of the experiences that people have with regard to cancer, they're very, very personal and subjective, because it brings out parts in themselves that have sort of sometimes been concealed, hidden, suppressed, not actualized. So there can be all kinds of reasons why a person chooses that, unconsciously chooses that path of awakening in a way. Awakening can happen on all levels, mind, body, spirit, many, many areas of life that have been sort of not tackled, not opened up. Like Richard, as you were saying, that person who has been deformed, what he really needed to learn from this and to discover from his deformity is to turn it into something incredibly useful for many other people, not just for himself but for other people. So he discovered that every negative, even if it looks like absolutely disgusting and terrible, being in a situation where he could feel like, I want to take my life because it's not worth living, that he has taken it to the other extreme and turned it into an incredible blessing for many, many people that then can experience their own self-empowerment and start to see that there is something worth living for, that they open their own hearts to areas where beforehand they just didn't even consider opening those areas of their heart. So he's an activator, he's a heart opener, he's making people aware, giving them the opportunity to develop unconditional love that is not based on superficialities such as the human physical expression, but see deeper into the soul of the person and see what's there or what isn't. And so in a a way.
It was exactly like that, Andreas, because even he met several people per chance that were committing suicide that night. And they took one look at him and they said, no, life is worth living.
Yes. So it's different for each person. That's why your cancer is not just one thing or another. We cannot really pinpoint that this cancer is like all the other leukemias of the same kind. But every single cancer is completely unique, and it is based on very unique causes. And the causes, in my opinion, are never negative. And that's hard to grasp unless we have sort of a wider perspective of life and to recognize that the way the world functions is based on two principles. One goes in one direction and the other goes into the exact opposite direction. And somehow they seem to be separated from one another. But just like the South Pole and the North Pole, they are in different places. They don't seem to have anything to do with one another, yet they're totally interconnected. If you sever the tie between the two of them, the entire globe would fall apart. The atoms wouldn't know where to go, where to assemble. So likewise, the negative is not far from the positive. The right is not far from the good, from the wrong. The up and down are linked together. There is no real difference between love and fear. Fear is love if we dare to see it that way, and love can be fear if we see it that way. Many people are afraid of loving. As grotesque as it may sound, but the two are always coming together. So if a person is diagnosed with cancer, there can be two different reactions to it. There can be the reaction, oh my God, what's happening to me, and I'm not in control, this is a vicious thing that's after me, it's trying to destroy me, I have to fight it. And so here the person that you spoke first on the plane, I've been struggling with this for 13 years, keeps coming back, and then I destroy it again, and then it keeps coming back, and I'm a survivor, which is like saying that, it's survival of the fittest, sort of. Sometimes you make it, and sometimes you don't. So the idea is that there's something vicious out there that is causing me problems. That puts you into a very, very difficult corner. It's like you're being cornered. You are the victim of circumstances, situations that are adverse to you. And so in that position, it is very, very difficult for the body to heal. And it is like paralyzing your immune system. Because under fear or under the threat of survival, like feeling I have to fight for my life, during that moment, or if that moment is perpetuated ad infinitum, then obviously it's very, very, very hard for the body to do the things that it normally does, like digest food properly, like eliminate waste products sufficiently, having a strong immune system, because the immune system can immediately be paralyzed the moment you are having fear for your life. So under the death fright, which a diagnosis can easily instill in you, then it is literally making it impossible for the body to activate the normal healing responses. And if the healing is not supercharged, then the person may not make very much progress, if any at all. Sometimes to a point that the illness seems to become worse. But the body always has the back door open. It's not just doing it in one way or another. For example, a person who is under fear and the immune system is not really working very strongly, to try to clean out the contamination that may be there in the blood or in the bone tissue, bone marrow tissue, and so the body has a hard time coming up with a swift, clean, and efficient healing response. And so what the body will then have to do is use other pathways, such as inflaming cells, allowing microorganisms to assemble in that area of contamination where they actually enter the cells, the cancer cells, the abnormal cells, to a point where there will be a massive infection. And the infection would then include yeast bacteria, other microorganisms, tuberculosis bacteria, which then would decompose the tumor or the cancer cells if they are moving around through the lymph or blood. And so the body wouldn't have a problem doing this, but it needs to, if the immune system is sort of on ice and is not capable of clearing out the toxins and the cancer cells that are thriving on toxins, that they have learned to absorb toxins, neutralize them, decompose them, and sort of dispose of them. So they're doing a very good job, but we vilify them, we give them a bad name, we call them like nasty things, bad cancer cells. And so that itself minimizes the body's ability, reduces the body's ability to heal from all of that. So there's in my opinion, a better approach, and I'm saying that not lightheartedly and irresponsibly, but because I've seen it happening in thousands of cases, and I've been in this field for 38 years. I know how it is to be cornered, to be in a position where your life is threatened because I was terminally ill when I was 12 years old, and so I was only given a year to live. So it comes from experience, and you seek usually the path that is reflecting some of your own experiences in the past, and so you choose a profession, if you will, that goes in the same direction, that it's sort of what you have learned you want to share. And whenever a person has something deep, a profound experience where their life was threatened, then they also become very good. So they're almost like learning how to deal with this and to do it in a natural way, if possible, so that they can go out and tell other people, this can be done. I was in your shoes, and why don't you try this? And people usually resonate with those who have had experiences like that. I've seen it over and over again that those who have gone through very serious issues like the cancer, and they have healed themselves, they have become, they were sought out by many, many people that resonated with that, and also needed to be activated in the same way. They needed that jump starting, that courage, like the deformed person who suddenly is able to save lives, so people that are ready to commit suicide. So there's a lot behind an experience, and to just try to get rid of the cancer without really healing the underlying issues, such as maybe I have not loved myself enough, or have ridiculed myself, or have not been assertive enough, standing up for myself, or I have let other people tell me what I need to do instead of you're taking that courage and saying, no, I have to do what I feel is right for me. So there are many, many opportunities behind an experience like this that you might want to embrace, and then go ahead with whatever you feel is right. That there is no right or wrong, and whatever you do, there are just experiences to be had, and every experience is very precious for humans because we can learn from good experiences just as much as we can learn from bad experiences.
You know, Andreas,
The things that in my life, I've learned them from bad experience.
I never have really talked to Michael too much about really his relationship with this guest he has, this uninvited guest. But I wonder if this is a time then maybe you really know every day probably that this you're hosting somebody else, and I wonder what's it like, to have this kind of a friend or unfriend.
Gosh, I've never really had any bad feelings towards this guest. I felt as I was walking to my doctor's office to get my diagnosis, I felt that I knew what it was, and there was an office of the Cancer Society on the way, and I just stopped in and I said, "Do you have a brochure on leukemia?" And I read it as I walked down the hall, and when he said, "You have leukemia," I said, "I know." So it seemed, it seemed right. It did not seem like the wrong fit or the wrong time or the wrong thing to happen to me. I've never had a bad feeling about it. I've always felt that it was, as I say, it was more, there's some kind of transformation happening inside, and it's just inevitable that there's going to be some kind of a matching storyline on the outside that would be consistent with that. I know my wife and I have different opinions about it, and she wanted me to fight it very hard and do a bone marrow transplant and different things, and I just didn't want to do it, and I never did do it. And not quite sure what I'm saying, except that it hasn't been, of course, the suffering is, I'm like anyone else, I don't like to suffer, but I've never really resented it. I've never really felt that it was foreign or that it was not just a part of me, or just a part of my life. I'm very curious, Andreas, if you've heard people say this kind of thing before, or if you, I'm just very curious what your reaction is when you hear that.
Well, it is, in my opinion, a very intimate process, and it needs to be recognized as something that is trying to help you, not trying to harm you. And sometimes I tell people, if you want to heal from something, you have to love it first. And that's a hard one, because there is so much in between, like an illness, like a cancer, and us. And so how can you love something that is trying to harm you, or that is affecting you, ruining your life, destroying the ideas and the plans that you have for your future? So, but it's a tough one, because there is all the difficulties that a person is experiencing when he feels threatened by it, is bringing to the surface a lot of unaccepted stuff, things that we have not had the chance to deal with. people have or undergone a traumatic experience, a kind of separation from someone, something, a situation. Sometimes it's a pet. Believe it or not, many people love their pets more than they love their spouses or relatives. It doesn't matter. It's something that a person is very, very strongly attached to or in love with, and then a separation occurs, like the death of a family member. And what happens during that phase when the separation occurs, or potential separation, let's say a divorce takes like 2 or 3 years to go through, what the body is doing, it is starting to build extra cells, cells that need to be created in order to take over some of the functions that the body could no longer do under the threat of the separation. Because whenever we feel threatened, again, our digestive system doesn't work properly. Let's say if you have a diagnosis, you feel threatened, obviously, the first thing. Then you go home, you cannot sleep properly because your brain tries to keep you awake so that you can find a solution to this issue. The digestive system doesn't get enough blood supply because under stress or tension, the gastrointestinal arteries will not supply enough blood to the digestive tract to help digest the food. So the result is that you don't absorb enough nutrients. When there are not enough nutrients in the cells, they will have to lower their metabolism so that they slow down. But all of that is actually conducive to feed extra cells to make available more nutrients that are extraordinary cells, that are not normal cells, that function on a different metabolic gear, so to say. These extra cells, they're not oxygen dependent, they're oxygen independent. So you start growing more of these extra cells that temporarily are taking over some of the functions of the organs and systems in the body. For example, if you had a threat, let's say a lawsuit, that's really bothering you very deeply. It keeps going on like 2 or 3 years. During those 2 or 3 years, you feel like you have to fight for your existence. You might lose a lot of money. You never know if you're going to win or lose. So you are under the influence of the fight or flight response. And what happens is that your lungs will start producing extra cells. And these extra cells, they are alveoli cells, they are needed in order to take up extra oxygen for the time being to deliver that to the muscle cells in the body so that you can continue running away or fighting the lion, the threat that you may be ruining your entire life. So here you produce these extra cells, and there is nothing really that the body is telling you anything wrong. You feel absolutely normal in that sense. But when the court case is over and you have won, let's say, and you feel absolutely jubilant, you have no more stress from that, suddenly a week or two later you start noticing you're getting sick. And when you get sick, it is not because the body is suffering from an illness, but the body is recovering from an illness that lasted for 2 or 3 years. So you were basically producing these extra cells, and now since the stress is over, the body no longer needs these extra cells.
So as I understand what you're saying is a normal medical system interrupts the natural healing cycle. And I mean, it's a huge crisis, but is it too huge? Is it like, is there a way to get through there without, is it risky to be that high of a fever, and diarrhea is dehydrating your body, and there are a lot of risks there, are there not?
Now we know that infection clears up cancer. It doesn't matter where it might be in the body. So if a person that catches the occasional cold or has the flu, instead of getting a flu vaccine every year, people should allow to have it because it can clear up their cancer. And there are actually some studies to show that in cold can get rid of cancer. So what I'm saying is that we have learned to not rely on the body, not trusting the body, not working with the body, not allowing the body to have its own, to even give it a chance to heal it itself. We are stopping the body in its tracks of trying to heal itself. And so that can cause more complications, like in the woman that you spoke to on the plane. It's becoming a struggle because she has to keep doing something about it, keeps repeating, comes back, and you suppress it, you have chemotherapy. Chemotherapy has a success rate of 2.3%. But what it does, it can destroy cancer cells, but not all of them. If you have, let's say, cancer, a tumor, that typically shows up once you have about 6 to 7 billion cancer cells in that tumor. But if you have only 2 or 3 billion, you wouldn't see a tumor. It just doesn't show up yet. You can reduce it with chemotherapy and radiation to 2 billion, and you say, and the doctor says, oh, we got it all, it's all gone. Great, but you still have 2 billion, and they will start dividing again and multiplying until we have fathomed what causes the cancer in the first place.
You know, many times, Andreas, I hear you speak about natural healing, and I can understand what you're talking about, and I can appreciate it, and it can remind me of some things that are simple as the flu. You know, like I remember I used to have these flu cycles that would happen or reoccur, where it would start with a tickle in the chest somehow, and then it would go to a sore throat, and then it might go to a nasal drip, and then it would go to a cough, and then it would go achy and all, you know, and then it would be over, and it had this 7-day cycle. And I used to just let it go a cycle like that. But a couple of times it would just get stuck. And somehow it would seem like I was having pneumonia or something, and 2 weeks would go by, and 3 weeks would go by. And I mean, I was thinking, like, this seems to really be damaging my body, you know. And then I would go into a antibiotic deal, and it would knock it out, you know. It would be gone, and so then I'd be okay for a year or 2 years or something like that. Or another example is we have a dog, and he had a swollen paw, and it was actually running, you know, where it was open sore, and we were putting on an antiseptic and stuff, but it just lasted too long. This dog had a swollen infection in his paw, and it wouldn't go by itself. And whether we could say, well, we have to do some kind of cleansing regime on him or do what, but somehow it just seemed like the expedient thing, instead of having him limp around and lick his paw, we would just give him antibiotics. And so I don't know, what can you do? I mean, sometimes it seems like it works like the way we want it, and sometimes it seems like it just hangs around and doesn't seem to complete its process. I mean, I'm thinking a lot of people are, you know, just trying to take the expedient way.
Yeah, that's why, you know, unfortunately, when they have chronic inflammation, that is actually a concern, because that's when you have increased cell division, and you have the growth of extra cells in order to cope with the lost function of that particular part of the body. So the body is trying to compensate. So that's why we find a lot of we find a lot of cancer cells when there's chronic inflammation. It's not that the inflammation is causing the extra cancer, but because of the root causes behind the inflammation, why the body has the need to inflame a certain part of the body, because it is so contaminated, it's so congested, that there is no other chance for the body to deal with it. Or the immune system simply is not capable of dealing with it in a different way, and then we need an inflammatory response to compensate that. We have to ask, where is it all coming from? And so in my work over the years, I've come to the conclusion that it is congestion of some sort. And in the liver, for example, if the bile ducts are congested, it can lead to all sorts of difficulties in the body, because the liver controls the distribution of nutrients in the body, the energy distribution. It decontaminates the blood. It's the filter of the blood. It makes sure that any noxious substances and toxins are removed and broken down. And if the liver is not producing enough bile, then the food is not digested properly. You have a lot of undigested food lingering, decomposing in the gastrointestinal tract. When that happens, you produce a lot of toxins. They enter the lymphatic system, and then they can lead to a localized congestion. And wherever this happens, you can have localized inflammation, or eventually even blood inflammation. And so the problem is that we don't have doctors who are trained to look for causes behind causes, or causes behind symptoms. Where does the symptom come from? And instead, we just look at, leukemia, we have these extra cells there. What are we going to do? Let's just suppress it. Let's just go and go to the bone marrow and replace it, or you give some drugs to suppress white cell production or whatever. It's just symptomatic. It's like trying to fix the expression. It's just like a plant where the leaves are withering, where they're sort of dying off because they're weak, they are diseased, and then instead of asking why does the plant produce these weak or withering leaves, there must be something wrong at the root level. So dealing with the root cause and supplying the right nutrients, definitely water, good water, and we might be surprised that the plant is healing itself. It may discard the leaves that have no longer any use, and then grow new ones to replace them. So we should learn more from how nature does things, and through observation we can find where does the problems begin. I've had an oncologist come to me whose wife had lung cancer, and she had suffered with this lung cancer for 9 years, and progressively it gets worse, and he has given her the best chemotherapy drugs that he could find on the market. He was always looking for the next best drug, and he pumped her full with these drugs. And I said to him and her, you don't really want to work on the level of the cancer. The cancer is not the problem. The problem is what causes the cancer. So I told her specifically to clean out her liver, and she did her first liver flush, and she passed an unbelievable number of stones. The first couple of bowel movements produced 2,000 stones. The doctor, he was absolutely, he couldn't believe what he saw. He looked at the toilet bowl and he smelled the stuff and said, "Oh my God, it smells like chemo drugs, like chemicals." And so all that stuff that was stored in the liver started pouring out of this woman. And so then the woman didn't just have that one day. She passed stones during an entire week. I've never ever heard this before. So the liver didn't even close the doors. The liver bile ducts kept staying open and kept pouring out those stones. And what happened is that 2 weeks later, he looked at her lungs, and he couldn't find the lung cancer, which had actually metastasized to her liver and into her bone. And there was nothing there except a tiny speck. And I said, keep going, because breaks down cancer because it can. So what she needed to learn is that she needed to set the preconditions so that the body can do it itself. We do not have to invent a healing method. It's already there, but we need to learn to reactivate it if it is being suppressed. And that's all that really is necessary. And if there's chronic inflammation in the dog, we have to look at why does it happen? What kind of foods is the dog reacting to? Is it processed food? Are there chemicals in there? Additives, things that create an inflammatory response that doesn't stop, that keeps going on. Because if we successfully stop inflammation through NSA drugs or antibiotics, what we're doing is we're pushing the stuff that the body tried to get rid of deeper into the tissues. So we can successfully get rid of an infection, which doesn't really mean very much because we are replacing it with something potentially far more serious. So we can you do something with natural means. There are other natural antibiotics that don't push toxins deeper into the tissues, but actually allow them to be cleared at the same time while these bacteria are being disposed of or nullified.
That just like that kind of like makes me realize, like how, and even with the dog, that we never really pay attention. Like somehow we're cut off totally to the dog, and we just give him dog food out of this one kind of a bag, and for years and years and years, and just think, you eat those pills, dog pills, and we never really considered that. Oh wow, he's probably reacting against those damn things, and But I mean, I've kind of, in all of my relationship with you, Andreas, and more in studying your work and understanding how you can relate body processes to what's going on in the liver, kidney stones that are blocking different processes, the whole nourishment and detoxification cycle, and what's the state of the lymphatic system, and it all seems like brilliant brilliant in one way, and in a huge oversight on the conventional type of medicine. But later, when I studied more in depth of your work, it seems like you might even be saying these things are even obsolete. Really, I hear you saying something like your state of anxiety, how you hold yourself, something else in your body-mind mechanism, which not even maybe is way beneath these physical processes, is really what's going on. Or, I mean, how far can you take this to the source?
That's a good one. Because here every effect has a cause underlying it. And then you find the cause itself is an effect that has another cause to it. And that cause has another cause behind it. And so you can trace it back to many places. And in some of my...
Where is it really effective to work on it? And it just depends on what you're able to address, I suppose.
Yes, sometimes it's an obvious one because it makes us feel not good. When you are afraid of something, anything, and you feel that you have to separate yourself from that. You're trying to shut the door to not let something come into your life that makes you feel uncomfortable, that you're afraid of. So what happens is that there are many different reasons behind that fear, but you can catch all of that if you allow the fear to come closer to you. When Jesus Christ said, "Love your enemies," and let your enemies come into your home, really meant love your adversities, love your fears, fears come into your heart. Home means heart. So there's no other home, right? The home is in the heart. So let the things that you are afraid of come into your heart, because that's where you can turn your enemies into your best friends. That's where you can make the transformations. Doesn't matter what caused that cause and that cause caused that cause. Doesn't matter. At the moment you allow a fear to be transformed into love, that means you bring it into your heart, you let it be. Instead of trying to push it away, you embrace your fears. You accept your fears. You accept your weaknesses, the things that you don't like about yourself, and to hell with it. Let it be and let it grow. That means sometimes I tell people, just imagine what you're afraid of. Let it, make it bigger, really, really big, as big as you can. Play with it, so that you can really feel the overpowering the sense of being weak in the presence of that fear. So let yourself feel that, and then one moment later you'll find, oh, it's poof, it's gone. And that means you have loved your fear, you have neutralized it. And so it's not very complicated, but it becomes complicated the moment you try to separate yourself from your fears, trying to push them away, trying to get rid of something, trying to fight something. You put your energy, your fighting energy into something, and it can only become stronger because it becomes energized. So by trying to get rid of something you don't like, you make it stronger. And it has to become stronger because the real reason behind the negative things is to allow us to embrace them, to love the things we don't like about ourselves. And so sometimes these dislikes are hidden so much in our subconscious mind that we need a crisis to bring them to the surface, so we have the opportunity to love what we hate, to love what we dislike, to love what we are afraid of. So there's nothing wrong about that. So life is.
How do we do that, actually, though? That, I mean, how do we approach that? I mean, do we have to just walk toward the cliff and jump over? Do we have to really just say throw down our medications and throw down our conventional relationships with conventional medicine and say, oh, okay, now I'm going to die or something like that, and then just see if on the other end of the tunnel I come out? Or, I mean, it sounds like it's like a really bizarre way to jump out of an airplane, right?
You know, there's a difference between resigning and between accepting. Accepting is when spontaneous remissions occur. There's actually a study done in Japan, and they found that people who accepted what their experience was, they had the terminal cancer, there was no hope, and they accepted it with their full heart, and they moved into a state of freedom where they felt so liberated, so light inside, that moment they experienced a spontaneous remission. So, but if they resigned and say, oh, I'm going to die, this thing is going to kill me, it's the end of my life, and they resign to it, that's the difference. So giving up or in a way committing suicide, there's not much of advantage in doing that. That's not what I meant here, but embracing the things, almost like making a list. What am I afraid of in my life? And then making check marks and say, well, okay, today I'm going to tackle this one. Tackling not by getting rid of it, but by accepting it, letting it in my life, letting it become stronger. If it's a disease, I'm going to let it be. There's this beautiful song by the Beatles, Let It Be.
Let it be, let it be.
And that requires participation. You have to let it be. It's not resigning to it, but you are actually actually letting it be. So it's a conscious decision, letting things run its course without trying to interfere with it. The moment we try to interfere, we put our fears in and say, "Oh, it's probably not going to heal itself, so I need to do this and this and this and this." So if it comes from your love, let's say if you, I would love my liver to be clean, then it's not fear-based. It's something that is almost like you love your body to be clean. That's a natural impulse. So cleaning the liver and the kidneys and the colon like that, it just makes you feel good. And because it makes you feel good, you want to sustain that. When you feel good,
I've only known Michael for this weekend, and I just found that he's such an incredible power to contemplate and to. I don't know what your comments could be on what we're hearing, and I know you have. This is not big news to you. You've had incredible contemplations about your relationship with your body and.
Well, I like the things that I'm hearing you say, Andreas, and I think I would really want to have some kind of an alternation between courage and comfort in my life. This is something that Richard and I talked about, that I would want to be as courageous as I could. Andreas, in the context that we were talking, I was proposing that when a person undertakes some kind of a self-investigation and they move towards those unstructured areas and the boundaries are less and less, and inevitably it becomes uncomfortable. And one begins to wonder, well, if the boundaries around this object can fall apart, maybe the boundaries around that special object that I call me, myself, could also begin to fall apart. And so naturally there's a fear there, and people call that, the void or the emptiness, or I call it the empty void. But what I've noticed is that the longer I can remain in that unstructured place without fleeing from that, the longer that I can just be courageous with this lack of boundaries, then the earlier I come back to my senses. When I land on the shore of the comfort, we flee the scary shore and we jump over to the comforting shore. But the longer that I've endured on the scary shore, the lower I land on the comforting shore, and that increases my chance of being able to turn around, so to speak, and get a glimpse of my true nature. This is the kind of a cycle of self-knowledge that we've been talking about, but I just am trying to say that I think there's this healthy alternation of courage and comfort, that fear is not all bad, because fear is the signature of me being courageous enough to remain alert within an environment that is unstructured, and that I believe there probably are different personality types. My type is such that I would want to test that. I would want to see if I could desensitize myself to that fear, and I would want to live on the edge, so to speak. I would pretty much insist on living on the edge so that I don't feel that I've become complacent. If anything, in me there would be a fear that if I become complacent, if I don't have, Andreas, my doctor was not able to find any cancer for a few years, but just in this last year, he's been able to find it again. And to tell you the truth, I don't know if this was a perverse reaction, but I felt like, okay, good. Now my palms are starting to sweat a little bit. This is good. I like this. I like being on the edge a little bit, enough that I feel that I'm engaging the boundaries of my comfort zone. This, this kind of not wanting to be complacent, but wanting to be a little bit uncomfortable. Wanting to have my toes over the edge, and looking down into that uncertainty, and to be pushing that a little bit all the time. This, I think, I don't know if this is right, but I think this might be something like what you're saying, in the sense that there is a healthy embrace of that, which is so potent that it can scare us on the one hand, but it can set us up for an insight on the other hand. And I would love to hear your comment on that.
I love what he says, Andreas, about alternating between courage and comfort, because somehow that's something that when you're advising people, that's the nemesis right there. They're saying, well, where do I go, and what is the line for me? What is courage for me? It might not be for someone else. Everyone has to find their own line of where on the courage-comfort scale that they can possibly exist. And I don't know, we're not trying to push them off the edge, but how does that work? That's insightful to me.
Yeah, absolutely. The spiritual self, the higher self, that is really controlling all of that for us, and our the sort of ego personality self, which is just carrying out commands made by the higher self. We require contrast in life, and otherwise we don't. As you said, you have to feel almost like discomfort while you have comfort, and you swing back and forth, and that allows us to have an experience of everything that's in between, just like a pendulum that swings back from one extreme to the other. In order to get to the other side, it has to go through the entire face, the middle part, and then swing across, and then end up on the other extreme. And so we go through experiences like that, so that we can be comfortable actually with whatever happens to us. And that would be the ultimate state of freedom. So the soul actually seeks to have that in any given lifetime, and sometimes we never ever get there. So sometimes the most difficult periods in a person's life are the most precious, because they open up these ranges of experience where the contrast is so big. I remember when I died in India of malaria in 1982. And it was one of my 3 near-death experiences. And my fever was incredibly high. I was so cold, I was shivering, even though the temperature outside was 120 degrees. And I was so cold, like I was almost like ice. And I was shivering because my whole body was so freezing cold. So I had these blankets over me, and still I was shaking, being so cold, but my fever was extremely high. And the doctor said, you have to take the fever-reducing medication. So I said, yes. And I put it under my pillow. and so then I died. I knew that I had to gain something from this. And I sort of said, well, if I have to die, then so be it. And I didn't have much fear of death, because I saw my father die 3 times before he crossed over in 1973. And he described to me whenever he came back, and they brought him back with pacemakers and stuff. And he described to me what happens when you die. So when it came to me dying in a very conscious way, so to say, even though I had this high fever, I was crystal clear. I was almost like separating myself from my body. And then when I literally died, I was dead for 8 minutes. And they already started taking me away. And somehow, when I had the near-death experience, it was the most beautiful experience. It would take a book to describe all those wonderful experiences. But when I decided I would come back, and then I woke up, within an hour, my malaria was completely gone. It never came back. And so it was like instant healing. So I realized that there's more than just the things that we know about the physical body, like having a parasite in the body that causes the malaria, and then you have these particular things. But I still had the parasite when I came back into the body somehow, but it didn't cause the malaria anymore. So there were a lot of questions that I had that were later on answered by me, and the one major thing is that if your higher self allows you to have a certain experience, it is one that is good for you. It cannot be bad for you.
It's a shame that...
So the boundaries that we sometimes have, we are so used to them. We create so many markers in our lives. You wake up in the morning, you see the alarm clock perhaps, you turn on the television, you have a cup of coffee, go to the kitchen, you do so many things, you go to your job, and then you come home and such, and you have a car, and it's your car. It's like we have so many different markers that allow us to tell us that we are living in this place, we do this is what our identity is, that sometimes there comes a point in our lives where all the identities have to be taken away. And we have to sort of recalibrate our system, realize who we really are, to identify with the only identity that really counts. It's not what we do, what we have learned, and what we have experienced, the amount of money that we earn, the things that we know about and share with other people, the husband, wife we have, whatever. These are learned or accepted or contrived identities that are not really our identity. The true identity sometimes gets lost or gets overseen. And when that happens, we need a recalibration that is taking away these markers. For example, a lot of people had recently experienced these tornadoes where from one moment to the next, within seconds, their homes were flattened. The jobs were gone because the places where they were working were gone. There was no more water. There was no more toothbrushes. There was just the money was flown away. The cash they had. So all their identifications, all their limitations, they were suddenly gone. And some people, they thrived in that, where they were deprived or void of any limitations that were considered comfort zone, the things that we were used to. Suddenly that was all gone. And what happens when you are confused, when there's nothing secure anymore, nothing that you're used to in that environment, that moment you are your higher self. You can only identify with what you are, not what you have acquired.
And that's an amazing moment. I know Michael wanted to say something just when you brought that up. A big smile came on his face.
Well,
area when I died,
go ahead.
I lost identity with the human body. And guess what? When I came into the body, I was no longer attached to, oh my gosh, I have malaria, or I have this. So the body went into instant healing. It healed it right away. It didn't have a problem with it. Because I had learned I wouldn't say lesson. I had re-identified with myself. I was so in love with myself. It was so beautiful. It was like crystal clarity. I could think of anything when I was in my body. Any thought, anything, any direction, any idea I had immediately manifested. I knew what it was, where it came from. I knew the origin, and where it would head to. I saw thousands of different probabilities for every case scenario I was thinking about. So I could.
It sounds so attractive, how you describe it. But in one way, it's you said, in a way, what you said was you were prepared, because you saw your father die 3 times. He explained you things that you had died before. You had near-death experiences. In India, you said it was the 3rd time, right? When you went out for 8 minutes and they were carrying you away. And so then somehow you were prepared. How can we all get prepared,
Life is, it's like sometimes you travel on the road and then suddenly you come at a crossroads, right? So then you have to decide, which way to go, because it's no longer a straight, road. It's just,
right.
You have to make a choice. Do I go right, left, or go straight? And each choice is correct, because each one leads somewhere else. And who knows which road is the right one?
Let's let Michael reflect on that.
Oh,
You've come to many crossroads.
Oh, I'm so sad. I'm so sad that we're short on time now, because I feel really the discussion in a way is just beginning. I would love to, tell of times that I feel I may have died, or somehow, it was the same kind of purifying experience. Perhaps there could be another part to this discussion, and we could, and I love your description of the pendulum, somehow swinging between the courage and the comfort, because as Richard and I have been wondering if it's at the bottom of the cycle of self-knowledge that we pass as if closest to our true nature. It's there between the courage and the comfort. We have fled the fear because our resource of courage has exhausted itself. And so we have fled the shore of courage. We have not yet landed on the shore of comfort. And between those two, as I think, Andreas, I think you said things that sound similar to this just now, that really is when we get that glimpse of our true nature. And so,
well, I guess we can glimpse it if we choose to look over our shoulder, look at it, right? I mean, there's something that we could close our eyes and just be resigned and just try to hold our breath till we get to comfort. But
my own belief,
yeah.
The moment we try to do it in a certain way, at that moment we are already fixed to the outcome, and so then we are not able to let go. It's not about getting to a place. It is about not being in a place anymore. Right?
So in other words, because you have to, in a way, despair and give up trying and feel like you're finished, huh?
Closer to we are larger, we are expanded. The moment we are trying, we are so limited. We are so tiny, and so a higher self doesn't accept us forever. It wants to be what it is. The ego personality is that little point. It's like this tiny little wave in the ocean, and the higher self is the entire ocean. So when you say, well, I'm this tiny little wave, that moment the ocean says, that's not true. You are the entire ocean. You just play a wave. You're just moving like a wave. But life is always, it's pushing us into places, situations, circumstances that allow us to experience the limitation. And then, through the limitation, say, oh, I'm a wave, yes, it's true, but I'm also the entire ocean. So both are valid. And that's why there is nothing wrong about fear or negativity, about ugliness, like deformities. If we can accept our deformities, then the deformities become our greatest blessings. Just like in World War II, soldiers that were injured and shot at, and they had their shrapnel in their spine. And my father, he was in the hospice for 1 year, and he couldn't move anything because his whole body was in cast for an entire year. Imagine that, you're buried alive. You cannot move anything. You're just lying there. So when these soldiers, when they were injured, there were reports written by the doctors, and the doctors said, what do you have to be so happy about? And the soldiers replied, well, it's the best day in my life. This is my way out. I will be able to see my family again. I'm not killed on the battlefield.
Wow.
So this is the very best case scenario. Being injured, I'm pulled away from the battleground, and I'm able to go back home to see my family. Even if I lost an arm or a leg or an eye, it doesn't matter. I'm going back to my family. So their interpretation of a negative situation was a positive one. And because of that, they could heal very quickly. And the doctors reported that they didn't have pain. They produced so many endorphins, natural painkillers, because then they consider this to be a happy situation. And these are happiness drugs. And so our body responds very quickly. Every time we have a reaction, we react either in a positive or negative way. We produce opposite types of chemicals, neuropeptides in the brain, one that suppresses the healing, the other one enhances it. And so, for example, we make interleukins, interferons. Interleukin 2 is a very powerful anti-cancer drug produced by the DNA of the cells. So the nucleus manufactures those particular peptides that then enhance the healing response. Now, people who are anxious about something or scared or concerned about something, they don't make interleukin. So they will suppress it, and that happens instantly. So you can see how powerful it is.
Your attitudes, your beliefs, your somehow that your appraisal of your situation, somehow how you hold yourself. We really thank you, Andreas, for such an enlightening discussion. And
to what is?
Yes.
The what is. So the what is really irrelevant. We are on a training ground. We can exercise our gift and the freedom of choice that we all have to respond differently than it is expected of us. When we go to a doctor, we are almost expected to be afraid of this diagnosis. You go to the doctor and they say, oh, thanks, doc. You have a big smile on your face. You think you're cuckoo. There's something
Right.
But there is this expectation that we are ought to suffer.
So I think we're going to have to close now, but we thank you so much for coming in and such a lively or enlightening discussion. We went to so many places, and it opened so many new doors of actually how to take care of ourselves and how to hold ourselves. And Michael, thank you very much for...
Thank you, Richard, and thank you, Andreas, for making this time for us.
Thank you, Michael, and I really wish you all the best, and because you deserve it so much. It's just there's nothing more to be said. You really deserve to benefit from this greatly, absolutely greatly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Andreas. And thanks everybody for coming and watching our conversation. And so, bye, Andreas.
Bye.
she had cancer for maybe some years, but she only found out about it much later, you know. And then the moment she found out about it, boom, the whole life went like a drop, you know.
And that's when the death fright kicks in. There's actually studies, there are studies, and I cite them in my cancer book, that autopsies have shown